We open in Wrangell, Alaska in 1979. Carl, a seasoned lumberjack, finishes his shift and heads to the local bar with his friends. As he drives, his radio starts crackling, and suddenly he sees one of his friends being lifted into the air. Shocked, Carl slams on the brakes. Moments later, his friend's car drops back to the ground. Carl rushes out to check on him, but that's when he sees it, a UFO. Panic sets in, and he turns to run, but it's too late. A beam of light engulfs him, and in an instant, he is pulled into the unknown. Now, in the present day, Isaac rides his bike down the streets of Pasadena, California, heading to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where he works as an intern. Upon arrival, he greets his colleagues and immediately logs into his workstation. As he decrypts an audio signal received from Canada, something feels off. It's unusual, considering there are no satellites in that region capable of transmitting such a signal. Intrigued, he intercepts it and redirects it through their own satellites before moving on with his tasks. Later that night, as he works late, his attention is pulled back to his computer. It has just received a file transfer from an unknown source. His curiosity is piqued, and he inspects it. During a therapy session, Isaac's therapist expresses concern. While his physical injuries are healing, she worries about his mental well-being. She suggests he start recording a 5-minute video diary each day. It may sound trivial, but research shows it helps. She wants him to give it a try. Reluctantly, Isaac agrees. He doesn't know what to say at first, but he records whatever comes to mind. One evening, while recording his diary entry, something falls from the sky, crashing nearby. Adrenaline kicks in, and Isaac rushes to investigate. As he approaches the crash site, military vehicles roll in almost immediately. He quickly hides, watching from a distance. He moves deeper into the forest, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever landed. That's when he sees it, a spaceship spinning in the clearing. He pulls out his camera, recording every second. Just before he can react, everything goes black. 3 days later, Isaac wakes up in the hills of California, completely disoriented. He has no memory of what happened, but his camera is still there. He plays back the footage and watches in disbelief. He was abducted. Then a strange sensation washes over him. His arm feels different. Back home, still processing everything, he notices something bizarre. His television vanishes before his eyes. Stunned, he steps forward. His hand pushes through an invisible force field. A moment later, the TV reappears. Confused, he tests it again, making his camera disappear and reappear the same way. Struggling to make sense of it all, he visits a doctor. The doctor advises him to stay hydrated and get some rest, but then reveals something unsettling. An X-ray of Isaac's arm shows a perfect fracture, something not naturally possible. As Isaac stares at the X-ray, realization slowly dawns on him. Something inside him has changed. The doctor examines Isaac's arm carefully, amazed by the complete lack of scars. He frowns, puzzled, and tells Isaac he needs to review the X-rays further before giving him any conclusions. Isaac nods and leaves, still trying to process everything. Back at work, he approaches Beck and asks if they can talk privately. Once they're alone, he places a cup in front of Beck and focuses. A second later, the cup disappears. Beck blinks, confused, but not in the way Isaac expects. Instead of being shocked, Beck looks at him like nothing happened. Then, to Isaac's surprise, Beck reaches out and picks up the cup like it was never gone. Isaac stares, baffled. To him, the cup vanished. To Beck, it never moved. Trying to make sense of this, Isaac checks the footage from his camera. The recording shows exactly what Beck experienced. The cup never disappeared at all. Then Beck mentions something that shakes Isaac to his core. "You said this happened yesterday, right?" Beck asks. Isaac nods. Beck hesitates before revealing the truth. "Isaac, your hike wasn't yesterday. It was 3 days ago." A chill runs down Isaac's spine. How could he have lost 3 days without realizing it? Still grappling with this revelation, Isaac returns home and uploads footage from his camera to a space science forum. Within hours, the video starts gaining traction. The next morning, he wakes up to his phone buzzing nonstop. A news station wants to interview him. When he checks online, his video has nearly 1 million views, and his inbox is overflowing. Reading through the comments, he sees a divide. Some believe his story, while others dismiss it as fake. Isaac agrees to the interview and tells his story in detail. The interviewer listens, but when she brings up the sheer convenience of him having a camera at the exact right time and place, she raises an eyebrow. Then, she hits him with another question. Given his background in NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, isn't it possible that he fabricated the footage himself? Isaac tries to defend himself, but she ends the interview abruptly, leaving him feeling frustrated and unheard. As the story continues to spread, mainstream media outlets label it a hoax. The growing attention starts creeping into his daily life. Reporters follow him, hoping for a new angle on the supposed alien abduction. Feeling isolated, Isaac searches online for others who might have had similar experiences. He stumbles upon a forum comment describing an encounter eerily similar to his own. Wasting no time, he messages the user and arranges to meet. At a diner, as he waits, he suddenly sees objects around him float for a brief moment. Just as panic sets in, the waitress snaps him back to reality, and everything appears normal again. He still doesn't know if what he's experiencing is real or just in his head. Then, the woman from the forum, Sarah, arrives. She's cautious at first, hesitant to reveal her story. She doesn't trust him yet, but when Isaac shows her his footage and other evidence supporting the theory that aliens have been hiding among humans for decades, her demeanor shifts. She leans in and asks, "Have you ever heard about the abduction in 1979? Isaac asks for more details, but Sarah admits she's foggy on them. She recalls that a man named Carl was abducted in Alaska, and after he and his co-workers took a lie detector test, only Carl failed. Shortly after, he disappeared without a trace. Their conversation ends, and Isaac gives Sarah his phone number before she leaves. Later that night, Sarah calls Isaac again, sharing more about Carl's story. Intrigued, he searches for any information on Carl online but finds nothing. He asks Sarah for a scanned copy of the article she found about him. Just then, he hears the news discussing his video, dismissing it as a hoax. Frustrated, he decides to send physical copies of the footage to multiple media outlets, hoping to prove his story. While struggling to fit the tapes into a mailing box, a stranger approaches and offers to help. The man recognizes Isaac and introduces himself as Keith, a writer who also runs a blog on conspiracy theories and unexplained phenomena. Keith expresses interest in Isaac's story, offering to help him tell his version, not the distorted one the media is pushing. He hands Isaac his card before leaving. At home, Isaac studies the card for a while before deciding to take Keith up on his offer. He visits Keith's office, where Keith suggests that they compile an article with all the available evidence, including a lie detector test. That way, people will have no choice but to believe him. Though hesitant, Isaac agrees, and Keith arranges the test. Isaac takes the polygraph, but once it's over, Keith leaves the room momentarily. Before he can return, Keith is ambushed by mysterious agents in black suits. He tries to escape but is shot with a stun gun. Meanwhile, Isaac is seized and transported to a secret facility where he's strapped into a chair in an all-white room. Sarah is also there, restrained in a separate section. A screen flickers on, revealing Agent Graves, who introduces himself and explains that they need to run some tests. A scale appears behind the glass, and Graves instructs Isaac to focus on it. The agents monitor him as they switch out various objects, but nothing significant happens. Isaac demands to know where he and Sarah are being held, but Graves ignores the question and instead asks what he knows about Carl. Isaac admits he doesn't know much. Disappointed, Graves orders the guards to keep observing them and says they will reconvene later. The moment Graves turns away, Isaac seizes an opportunity to escape. Tapping into an unknown ability, he destroys the robotic guards restraining him, then rushes to free Sarah. As they make their way to the exit, additional guards appear, firing high-energy weapons at them. Isaac quickly picks up a fallen robot's gun, and returns fire while continuing to flee. They reach a locked door, and with no time to spare, Isaac instinctively focuses on it. To his shock, the lock disengages as if responding to his will. They slip through and escape, only to realize they are in Costa Rica. Meanwhile, Graves orders his team to track them down, hoping they will lead him to Carl. Now, fugitives, Isaac and Sarah, find themselves in a small cafe. He tells Sarah that they need to find Carl if they want answers. He asks a woman at the cafe where they can find a computer, and she directs them to someone named Zed. However, she gives the instructions in Spanish, and Isaac only catches bits and pieces due to his limited understanding of the language. As they navigate the unfamiliar streets in search of Zed, Graves intensifies his search, determined to recapture them. Eventually, Isaac and Sarah arrive at a waterfront tavern where they are pointed towards Zed, a man sitting with his laptop. Approaching cautiously, Isaac and Sarah introduce themselves. Zed, suspicious by nature, tells them that if they lie even once, he won't help them. They sit down and begin sharing their story, but before they can finish, Isaac spots Graves's men closing in. Realizing they need to move fast, Zed leads them out through a hidden exit, guiding them to his secluded treehouse home deep in the jungle. Inside, Isaac is eager to get to work, but Zed tells him to take it easy while he sets things up. Meanwhile, Sarah and Isaac chat on the balcony. Sarah reveals that she already knew who Isaac was before they met, thanks to all the media coverage. She also shares her abduction story, and the two bond over their similar experiences with aliens and how people reacted to their stories. They head back inside to check on Zed, who hasn't made much progress. Isaac suddenly remembers something he heard about British Columbia. They keep brainstorming, and Isaac wonders if the files he received at work from Canada could be coordinates for Carl. They look up the coordinates and find a cabin in the woods in British Columbia. Zed finds a link, and they decide to call Carl. When Carl answers, Isaac calls out to him, but Carl immediately hangs up. Zed suggests trying again and bypassing the system to ensure the call goes through. They try again, and Isaac quickly explains the situation, just in case Carl hangs up again. But when Isaac mentions that he got a signal, Carl cuts him off, demanding the data. Zed takes over and hacks into the NASA system to retrieve the data for Carl. Sarah is confused about why Carl wants the data, but Isaac thinks it might be more than just information. It could be communication from aliens. They send the data back to Carl, and he reviews it. The audio reveals that the aliens are returning and heading to British Columbia in 5 days. Carl warns them to stay off the grid before shutting off the connection. Isaac tells Sarah they need to go to British Columbia, but she is hesitant. He tries to convince her, saying he must go, but he'd like her to come with him. Eventually, she agrees, and Zed offers to join them. Thanks to Zed's knowledge of the area, they leave Costa Rica by land, sea, and air. Meanwhile, Graves learns they're heading to Canada and warns Canadian agents to be on the lookout for them. Upon reaching Canada, they take a train deeper into the country, with agents quickly closing in. Isaac and Sarah discuss things while Zed works on his laptop. He finds a radar in the area that can track signals, and he spots the agents approaching. The group looks back and notices the agents boarding the train. To avoid detection, they move to another car and put on masks to confuse the robot's facial recognition systems. The trick works with one robot, but the other gets too close to Isaac before firing. The group runs and climbs onto the roof of the train, with one robot chasing Isaac and the other giving pursuit. But then he sees his partner being taken out, so he goes to investigate. But Zed is waiting and kicks that last robot off the train. The trio continue making their way through Canada, hitchhiking with a stranger, with Zed keeping a close eye on where they're going and any potential agents chasing them. Soon they reach a cabin in the woods, and Carl runs out with a gun, ready to open fire. Isaac reminds him of their conversation and formally introduces everyone. He asks if they've deactivated their trackers, but they don't know what that means. Carl runs inside, grabs a device, and comes back outside to deactivate them himself. Graves isn't too happy about that move. Now Carl explains that after he escaped, he started looking for a way to contact the aliens. That's what Isaac saw at NASA. He shows them the audio he managed to get, and it's transcribed. translation. He tells Isaac that what he received was the most substantial response he's ever gotten after years of trying to make contact. With Isaac's unintentional help, he was successful. Now they're amazed that he can communicate with aliens. Isaac asks what happened to Carl all those years ago in Alaska. Carl begins telling the story, a story they're all too familiar with, albeit slightly different from theirs due to some differences. They all sit around as a thunderstorm approaches, with Sarah playing some music on Carl's record player, finding peace in the music. Meanwhile, Graves prepares a team to go to the last known location of the fugitives, hoping to find Carl. Zed is looking around in awe at Carl's impressive setup, impressed by Carl's knowledge, considering he was a lumberjack before the abduction. Sarah asks Isaac if he's nervous, and he tells her no. She continues asking if he remembers what happened back at the facility when he saved her and opened the door, like they were changed during the abduction to give them some abilities they aren't even fully aware of. They continue discussing that before wandering through the forest and returning to Carl's home. When Isaac walks in, Carl confronts him. He tells Isaac that they need a plan for when the aliens arrive, as they may only have one chance and things could go either way. Now, on the day of the arrival, they all wait for something to happen. The earth starts shaking, and Carl says they're close. Isaac runs outside, and the others try to stop him, but Carl tells them to let him be. Isaac continues running through the woods, and then comes across an alien again. At Carl's home, the alien sits with a translator device, courtesy of Carl, to help decipher what he's saying. The alien tells them that they've studied a lot, but desire to learn something beyond their understanding, the origins of the universe. The alien then asks if they have any questions, placing his finger on Isaac's forehead and asking who the man in the vision is. Isaac asks why they're looking for him now, and the aliens believe he's a link to the origins of the universe. Satisfied with their answer, the aliens ask if they have any further questions. Sarah asks why their arms hurt. The alien puts a bracelet on her and shows her arm being separated to reveal a tracking device. He takes it back and grabs Isaac's before they can finish when Graves and his men arrive. Carl grabs his gun and sees the men outside his home. Graves calls out for him to exit the building and grows more agitated, saying he wants to know what happened to Robert Graves, his father. It's personal for him. He gives Carl a minute to exit the cabin. Carl runs out with a gun and explains the story to Graves again, telling him he doesn't know what happened to his father. Unsatisfied with that, Graves orders his men to shoot, and they do. Carl drops to the floor and Sarah runs over to check on him. Then Sarah is taken out as well. Zed tries to escape, not wanting to be next. And now the aliens finish with Isaac's arm. Before leaving, they tell him to focus on his powers. The agents are shooting and Isaac sends out a temporal wave, slowing down time. He walks outside and grabs Sarah before disappearing. He comes back for Zed and Carl, taking them to another dimension where the aliens heal them. Now, in their dimension, Graves is confused as to where they vanished to, but now invisible. They walk through the agents towards the spaceship, and Graves sees it take off. 6 months later, Isaac and Sarah are now together and in love. Zed is working with Carl, running a science program, and Agent Graves is fired. Thanks for sticking with us. That was our recap of the film Proximity, which was released in 2020 by Shout Studios. It starred Ryan Masson, Heidi Kwan, and Christian Prentice.